Yeah, indeed, pretty wide-ranging, wasn't it? Impassioned at times, certainly ambitious. Many would say overly ambitious, considering many of these things she cannot simply deliver on her own. But I think in many regards it was a pretty solid speech, one that potentially may have won over some MEPs who might not have been on side before. As I say, it was impassioned about defending those European values, saying that she would be a fighter when it came to issues like rule of law. So I think for many pro-EU MEP, she certainly struck the right tone, and she certainly worked the room pretty well. But yeah, you're right, she touched on a range of stuff, started off speaking in French, particularly on this issue of her being the first ever woman nominee to be put forward for this job of Commission President, talking about how she wanted to make the Commission itself gender balanced, and how she wanted to make violence against women enshrined into EU law by incorporating it into EU treaty. But also she touched on the issue of climate change, talking about how she wanted a more ambitious target by 2030, and indeed Europe to be carbon neutral by the turn of the middle of the century. Also talk about a carbon tax. It went far, but not far enough, many of the Greens would argue. She talked about being a mother of 7 and how she wanted to tackle things like youth unemployment, and also how she wanted Europe to look after its children better, taxing tech companies like Facebook and Google, and also went on to talk about the Mediterranean and the death toll there, calling it one of the most deadly borders in the world, promising a new pact on migration and asylum. And also finally on the issue of Brexit, she said it was with regret that Britain had decided to leave, that it should be treated with respect, but as Commission President, even though it's not up to her, but she would stand ready for a further extension to the withdrawal agreement if a further extension was required beyond the end of October 31st. So a wide-ranging speech, as I say, hit on lots of different issues. This is part of her attempt to build up that wide coalition she needs in order to get the majority of MEPs on side in a vote later on today.
Well, has she done enough, Darren, of a balancing act to please the MEP and to increase her chances of being confirmed later today?
Well, you know what, speaking to MEPs and listening to kind of what the kind of mood music here is in Strasbourg, really no one quite knows. They all know it's going to be close. It's probably going to be, if she does win, less than 400. I think Jean-Claude Juncker last time had a majority of 46. But the problem, of course, that Ursula von der Leyen is facing this time round is this kind of broad coalition she's having to build up in a much more fragmented European Parliament, in the sense that, you know, up until a couple of months ago, the EPP and the S&D, the two largest parties, had an overall majority. That is no longer the case. So in order to try and woo these MEPs, which she's been doing over the last couple of weeks, both here in Strasbourg and in Brussels, by writing letters and going and listening to delegations, she's been trying to build up that broad coalition. But of course, if she goes too far in one direction, promising too many things to one political grouping, she can off-put the other. Hence why, while it was an ambitious speech in many regards and wide-ranging, in many ways it didn't actually have an awful lot of detail. It was quite broad strokes as well. So is it going to be enough? Well, the ultimate answer is no one knows. It is going to be a secret ballot. MEPs are going to begin voting at around 6 p.m. and by 7:30, 8 o'clock, we will know whether Ursula von der Leyen will be the next Commission President, the first female Commission President. And I think ultimately what may weigh the heaviest on MEPs' minds is not necessarily, even if they like her or her agenda, is that do they really want to start this process again? Do they really want to go back to the drawing board and essentially try and find an alternative name? And ultimately, would that alternative be better than what they've seen this morning?